On this episode of the Mesa Arts Center podcast, we speak with artist Miguel Angel Godoy. Miguel is a scholar of hip-hop culture and practitioner of breaking and graffiti for over the last 2 decades. His work is informed by the value of storytelling and the power of building community through art. Godoy continues to use hip-hop as a source of inspiration for his work by creating spaces where stories of the communities are shared, community members feel represented, and to promote a critical awareness of the need to look at the spaces in between. Please enjoy this podcast, and thank you for listening. And we are live with the man, the myth, the legend, Miguel. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Did you like my slow pull down?
I did. Yeah, that was good, man.
That's about as DJ hip hop as I get.
That's enough.
Yeah. So let's talk first and foremost about the most obvious, which is my outfit.
Yes.
You like it?
I do. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. You're a Suns fan.
Huge Suns fan.
Yeah, you got the same hat as I do, yeah.
Yep.
But what makes this outfit really special, and the reason why I'm wearing it here today, is because you, my friend, designed this jersey and the hat and the city edition. So
that's true.
First of all, congrats. I think that's a major thing. But tell me about how that happened, because it was really a surprise.
Was it?
I didn't know you were doing it.
Oh, you're right. It was.
It was like nothing. There was nothing. And then all of a sudden I was like, yo, that's Miguel, man. Like, so how did it all happen?
This was 2 years ago.
Okay.
You know,
2 years ago.
2 years ago, man, that we did all the work. The Suns contacted me through my social media sites, and they were interested in collaborating with a local muralist. And they had seen some of my work. They were familiar with it already. And they threw out the opportunity, and so that's really how it started.
Yeah, That's really cool. So talk a little bit, because the story behind the design is what I think is really cool. It is an homage to lowrider culture and Latino culture and things of that nature, and then it also, I think, blends in, and correct me if I'm wrong, kind of like one of your main aesthetics, which is really like interesting line work in your art. So how was that for you?
Yeah, it was. It didn't start with the lowrider aesthetic. I think the debrief, the whole purpose of the City Edition uniform was really to celebrate the Mexican American story here in Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
Really celebrating the Phoenix Chicanos, and so it was. It's layered. The design went many ways, but one thing we kept coming back to was the idea of the lowrider culture, right? Because that's something that is exclusively Chicano.
Yep.
And I grew up drawing Chicano art. My dad drew. Him and my mom both were kind of involved in the culture early on when they were teenagers. And so my dad always drew, and that's what he drew, right? That's what he knew, was all that lowrider aesthetic, things that came from the campo or the projects where he lived. And so that we grew up, I say we, because it's my brothers and my sister as well. We grew up collecting the lowrider magazines. We were into the lowrider arte, the lowrider bicycle magazines. We built lowrider bikes. We had a lowrider bike club called the Drastic Measures Bike Club.
Nice.
This was in Columbus, Georgia. We used to put hydraulics on the model cars. My brother Jesus used to get into it more than me.
Okay.
But so we were in it.
Yeah.
But that was years ago, right? This was me when I was growing up, and then I really got into hip hop, and got into b-boy and into graffiti, and then murals and then teaching.
Yeah.
Right? So it was really beautiful to be able to come back to that Chicanismo, to come back to my roots, to celebrate that history, my father's history, my mother's history.
Yeah.
And then have that represent the whole city. Right, have that represent the whole culture, like that. That was huge.
Yeah, I feel very proud and honored, because like I'm a lifelong Suns fan. I love basketball, is my favorite sport. I've been a Suns fan my whole life, and I think for me, especially now that I'm older, I have a deep appreciation for the city, right? Because, you know, we're one of the largest cities in the country, but I always say we're like a small, big city because, you know, there isn't a lot of like highlighting the culture that comes from this city, right? It's starting to happen now more so than anything. And I think a perfect example of that through my lens is, you know, I'm a poet, and when I travel to other cities, people always say, dang, like, you're a really good poet. Where are you from? And I'm like, oh, Phoenix. And they're like, Phoenix? Almost like I'm not supposed to be good because I'm from some, you know.
Right.
And
yes.
And so I've always wanted to like make sure that our city and the culture is honored, and you did an amazing job at that.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Phoenix, thank you for saying that. Phoenix is a really special place. Hold on, I want to say a couple things. And then the whole purpose behind the City Edition is really celebrating the culture, the city, the people.
Yep.
And last year they had the Originative, right? That was really celebrating the Native American history here.
I got the hat and the jacket.
Oh, yeah? That's beautiful,
I didn't get the jersey because I told you, I was like, I love the jersey.
Yes.
But I don't like buying new jerseys because players get traded all the time. Right. So I'm like, I only do the retro jerseys.
I got you.
But I told you, I was like, I'm getting this one because
you did say that. I remember you saying
that,
man. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
And so, so this City Edition, you know, they were looking at the demographic, the majority of who the fans were, right? And it was first, second, third generation Mexican Americans, and so I think that's why they really chose to celebrate the Chicano culture here.
Yeah.
But Phoenix has always been special to me. You know, my brother-in-law's been out here for many years, and he's always tried to get us to move out here. We were in San Diego for many years. And when I was really into b-boying, like Phoenix, something about Arizona, there was something really special.
Yeah.
Like my crew, the Rock So Fresh, was heavily inspired by b-boys that came from Phoenix.
Yeah.
That came from Tempe, the Tempe Bronx crew.
Yeah.
And so Phoenix has always been a really special place to me. And I think it was just natural that we moved out here, and it's just been really nice to be here and be a part of it all.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful you're here.
Yeah,
I'm really grateful that you're here. So, and I'm going to give a shout out to, I think one of the legendary b-boy crews of Phoenix is Furious Styles.
Absolutely.
Crew, right?
Absolutely.
You know,
yes.
and House and all of those guys.
House, Odin, yes.
Yeah.
We were rivals, man. We used to, yeah, we were rivals, man. We've ran in many circles, many battles together, man. Absolutely, yeah.
That's cool,
and now we're colleagues at ASU.
That's right. Huh? I know, man. It's crazy how you have evolved and how hip hop has evolved, and because that's a really great segue into kind of like, so you are, I think. And I'll give you props here because you are a father. You're an amazing father, right? You're a husband, an amazing husband. But you're an academic as well, which doesn't always, like when you think about hip hop and academics, it's like they were in complete contradiction for so many years. Sure. But like you and individuals like House have figured out how to kind of take the essence of hip hop and put it in the ivory towers. So like, how's that experience been for you?
Not easy. Right.
Okay.
I think first, and I can't speak to everybody's experience, but I guess from my own experience, there's a lot of identity formation that has to happen, right? You really have to be sure of yourself when you go into these spaces.
Yeah.
Because not everyone understands and not everyone cares to understand. But fortunately, I did have some mentors that really cared. And really showed love and let me speak, my boy, let me speak.
Yeah.
And I think that plays a big part, just having that support. But with or without it, I was still going to do me, right? Because that's what hip hop is all about. You show up in all these spaces and you show up as authentically as you can.
Yeah.
And so once I realized that that's how I had to be, like, there's value in coming from the streets. There's value in hip hop. There's value in this subculture. But you have to learn that first. You have to appreciate it. It's one thing that, you know it, you feel it, you exude it. But when you go into these spaces, you do kind of feel like am I academic enough? Am I using the right vernacular?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing all my R's the way I should be? Right?
Do I really know what pedagogy means?
Yeah. And I didn't. I didn't when I first started. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, what is this word?
Yeah.
And I almost got laughed at. Right?
Yeah.
So it was a huge culture shock for me.
Yeah.
But we belong there. There's space for us at the table, and we belong there.
Yeah. I am a huge advocate for education, right? And I do believe that colleges are a great place for education. I don't particularly like the way college has been commercialized in some ways, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I think that what gives me hope about like higher level academics in colleges is that there are individuals like you that are there, right? Because without that, it just becomes like a very privileged ivory tower type of experience. Right. And like that, what good is that if we're really trying to create a diverse and inclusive world?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So you said that your pops was an artist and your mom. When did art like really start for you in your life? Like, how old were you?
I think it really started when, I've been drawing since I was young, like following my father's footsteps, right? Like really copying his drawings. And then we started to get into Marvel comics, me and my brothers. And we started copying all the Marvel comics. And like I told you, we used to copy all the drawings from the Lowrider Arte magazines.
Yep.
And so that kind of was, that was my childhood. But it wasn't until I think the 8th grade that, and not many people know this, but my wife's mother, my mother-in-law, was my 8th grade teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
I
cool. lived with my grandparents in Southern California for a year. My family was still stationed in Hawaii at the time, and I was there for a year and just causing ruckus, man. I was a real travieso.
In the 8th grade?
In the 8th grade,
okay.
Man. I was.
For some reason, that doesn't surprise me. I feel it, right? All right.
Hey, what are you trying to say?
I feel it.
Yeah, and so, and I was lost, man. Honestly, I was a lost kid, and I think that this is a long story, but it's a big part of being an Army brat and not knowing who you are, not knowing where you come from.
Yeah. And
so finally, I'm in Southern California. Finally, I'm around people that look like me. I've always been intrigued by movies and the culture and the stories, and so I think naturally I got into kind of the wrong crowd, and that's what I thought it was about, right? And so, and I remember this, that my mother-in-law, Miss Bottoms, Araceli Bottoms, was an amazing educator, and she believed in me, and she brought in a social worker to talk to me and one of the other knuckleheads that was really good at art.
Yeah.
And she brought that social worker to come in and talk to us, and she came in and really asked us what it is that we wanted to do. And we're like, well, we're really good at drawing. We love drawing. And she's like, well, you should look into art. There's something in art. You can be educated in art. You can do things. And I'll never forget, she actually brought her boyfriend in one of the sessions. She brought her boyfriend who had a mini truck with the hydraulics on the bed. Oh, that was awesome, man. That was like my first impression. We got to hit the switches. That was my first impression of really sitting in a lowrider. And so that had a huge impact on me, right? Yeah. But my mother-in-law really pushed me in the 8th grade. She said, do something with your art. She'd always give me projects. Me and the other guy, Ricardo, she would always give us projects to do. And I started to kind of learn who I was, right? Yeah. Own my value then. So yeah. I would say the 8th grade was very pivotal.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. Yeah, and I love that, because I think for a lot of people, but for young boys, that is like a very critical time, 8th grade, like, because you're not quite a young adult yet, but you're not a kid anymore. It's like literally called middle school for a reason. You're right. Like in this like transition period, right? And if you don't have good mentors and educators, like you could go astray. That's my story.
You're right.
This isn't about me, but
right.
I totally relate to that, in the context of like 8th grade was really where I was like, yeah, this world is not for me, right? And I didn't know what I wanted to do. So it's really cool to hear that somebody inspired you, because that's so important.
Absolutely.
Did you know, so did you know that, like, did you know Mata yet?
No, I didn't.
So
actually. I knew she existed.
You knew she existed, but you didn't know her
I didn't
yet.
know her.
That's funny.
I went with her. I went to school with her older brother.
Okay.
We were in the same class,
right.
actually.
That's cool.
But, you know, our families go way back. Our families grew up together.
Okay.
My mother-in-law and my uncle were best friends growing up, all the way
nice.
from kindergarten to high school.
Yeah.
You know, and then, so our families go way back. But I was always gone. You know, I was an Army brat, so we were always gone.
Yeah.
And then we came back, and then I met my wife serendipitously.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
That's cool, man. That's a really cool story.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So 8th grade is where it starts for you.
Right.
Then you get into hip hop, and you get into what I think would be called street art and graffiti and murals and things like that. Where does it click for you that this is what you want to pursue as a career? And the reason why I ask that is because we live in a culture and a society where art is not a career. It's a hobby. It's cool. Very few people actually get to make it their career. Like, when did you decide that that was going to be your career?
Yeah, that took many years.
Okay.
You know, honestly, I knew in, you know, going from middle school, you know, anyways, being in Southern California at that time.
Yeah.
Right? We got stationed in Columbus, Georgia. And so for 10 years I was in Georgia. Eight of those years was in Columbus, 2 in Atlanta. But being in high school, right, and kind of getting into the same shenanigans still, but having an art teacher in high school that believed in me and believed in not just me, but all my buddies are part of a graffiti crew in high school, and really pushing realism, pushing a different form of art. He it's funny because he had the Subway art book in his classroom, and so he knew about graffiti. He hated graffiti. He hated that we did graffiti.
Yeah.
So he really pushed realism, pushed a different type of art on us, and I think that's when I realized, like, hey, there's something here. You know, it's not just about graffiti. It's not just about the lowrider art. There's something deeper that's existing here that I want to learn about. I want to know about. And then and so as I started to really take it serious, I was like, I'm going to be an artist. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to be an artist. So whenever anyone would ask me, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? An artist. I already knew that, right, around that time. And so it has changed, you know, my understanding of an artist and my career has shifted many times throughout the years. But I think it was through high school and again, through having a mentor and having that support from William Joe Crawford. That was my high school art teacher.
All right. Shout out to William.
Yeah. WJC.
Yeah. That's
He's a
cool.
pimp too, man.
Yeah.
He was always dressed to the nines, man.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
yes.
cool, man.
Yeah, I love that, man.
It's funny how, so let's just, because we're around the same age. So
Right.
in high school, we're talking the 90s,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so have you thought about how long ago that was?
Now I do.
That's just completely
Now I do.
separate conversation, but it's like, yo, that was like 20-some years ago, right?
I know.
I know. But it's crazy because now street art is revered and it's put in galleries and you know it. But back then, you had teachers who hated it, right? And well, that's really cool, and that's a testament to him too, that he hated it, but he didn't let that like kind of write you off.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
really cool.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah.
So here is where I think I really have a tremendous amount of respect for you, because you're an amazing artist and that holds its own, but you have figured out how to take your art career and blend it into community development, right? And what was the first kind of project that made that connection for you?
That first project was in 2008. I started to do a series of utility boxes in Southeast San Diego,
Okay.
which many would have considered the hood, right? And I was turning wrenches at the time, working on a shop floor, and I remember a lot of my coworkers would tell me, "You better take a gun with you. You're going to be working over there doing all this public art, man. That's the hood." And so I went with this preconceived notion of what that area was going to be like. And, you know, and it didn't bother me, but it was in my mind. And then just through being out there painting, you know, the utility boxes,
Yeah.
just kind of see them around town that are painted. So we were painting them with one-shot oil enamels. A lot of them get vinyl wraps or with acrylics. We were doing them with the one-shots. And the amount of support I got from the hood, from all the families out there, is really what changed my trajectory of what art was, what community art is, what public art is, what community means to me. I went in there with an idea of what I wanted to express in my work, and that they flipped it on its head. They came out, and I realized this is not about me at all. This is it's like these people needed this art.
Yeah.
You know, not to say that it validates them in any way, but, you know, it plays a big difference. You have to shift the conversation, right? And so now you can look at Southeast San Diego and Encanto, and there's beautiful artwork. There's a couple murals that I did there in that neighborhood and that are still going. My graffiti mentor, Pose 2, a.k.a. Max Moses, is still in the Encanto area, still doing work.
Damn, that's crazy.
And so, but you have to shift the conversation, you know? And so that's what really impacted me with community work. I saw how much the community responded to my work and how much I could be a conduit for them.
Yeah. That's really cool. I think, you know, art, so I'm not a historian in art, but I know enough to know that art, it was the first form of communication, right? And storytelling, right? It was the oral tradition of telling stories. And then, you know, again, not a historian, but like the hieroglyphic, you know, like art on, you know, what help me
like
here.
The
Where's it? The petroglyphs. Yeah.
Yes,
right.
Yeah,
and so it has always been a conduit to telling story and preserving tradition and things like that. And I think that so I grew up in, I guess, what would be considered a hood in Phoenix, right? A lot of the preconceived notions, I understand them, but it's like the hood is really, really close to me. It's close to the essence of humanity, because it is kind of still wild, right? You know, the beginning of humanity, if you ever think about it, like it was dangerous in the beginning of humanity, right? And the hood is dangerous, but it's that danger that I think really fuels us and gives us passion. And so, you know, like
I'm thinking here.
Yeah, right. Stories, and so man. I think, oh man, I know this podcast could go left for sure. We could go left, but instead we will go right.
Okay.
All right. And we'll talk about the work that you're doing here at the Mesa Arts Center, as it pertains to art and community development.
Right.
You are currently doing a community residency called One Street Over, in partnership with our engagement department here at the Mesa Arts Center. Shout out to Danica, our community engagement specialist. She is one of the hardest working people I know, so I want to give her a shout out.
Nice.
And explain to us what the details of that is, because it's really cool. We just had our midpoint celebration, which I thought was amazing. But like, what is the objective of this residency?
The main objective is really it's centered around identity, right?
Okay.
Taking the ideas of the Whitman Park community and taking their ideas on what they want to see done with a public art piece. And it's layered, right? Yes, there's a public art component. There's going to be a mural. There's going to be some pole banners that are designed, all generated from the ideas from the community. But it's also the engagement, right? Having pláticas with the community members there at Whitman Park. The engagement that Danica and her team have had at the elementary schools and gathering all the students' feedback on identity and what it is they want to see. And really it's what it means to them to be part of the Whitman Park community, like creating some identity off of that.
Yeah.
That's the main objective.
Yeah. And so you started with going into the park, and I think if my memory serves me correct, you all were like going door to door, like knocking on doors and saying, hey, we're here. This is what we're going to do.
Right.
We want you to be involved. Like That's a very, that's a difficult thing to do.
It's very, yeah, absolutely. There's so many moving parts to this, you know, and I'll be honest, I'm doing a lot of the art component, right?
Yeah.
I'm taking the ideas and I'm making the thing visually happen.
Yeah.
But a lot of the legwork, a lot of the field work has really been done with Danica and her team and Rel CDC and a lot of the city people too. A lot of the organizations that are really all coming together, Parks and Rec, and I don't know all of them. To be honest with you, there's so many, but I think that's one of the most beautiful parts about this project, though, is that there's so much buy-in from so many different organizations that want to see something happen.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so we have the City of Mesa, which is the house of the Mesa Arts Center, as well as Parks and Rec, and then we have Mesa Public Schools, because you all are going into the schools and doing residencies with the students as well there. So have you met any? So for context purposes,
yes,
we were just last week at the Midpoint celebration. We had a festival of I would call it a festival, right? Food, people, music, entertainment. And it really was just to kind of celebrate where we are in this process, but also continue to build momentum because we want more buy-in. I came with my son, Santiago, right, my youngest son. We brought his bike because we're going to the park, and I didn't know what to expect, but we show up, and there's like 10 kids who have bikes, right? And now we're not a part of this community in the context of, like, we don't live there.
Right.
But within 5 minutes, my son, I said, was in a bike gang. I was like, he is with these 10 kids. They're riding around. And I remember what it was to be 7, going on 8 in a bike gang. I was like, oh, they're up to, you talk about, traviesos, right? They're causing problems. But have you met any, like, characters in the community that really stand out?
There were a couple that I met that day, actually, at the Midpoint. For sure. And they will come, right? And those are the people that I really try to learn a lot from and get involved. Yeah, because it's really about their stories. It's really about having them involved somehow. So I definitely met some characters out there.
Yeah, and that to me, I think that's what makes you so special, is because you do bring a wealth of knowledge and experience, and, like, I think a genuine spirit to this work. And I'll say that the first time I met you were the keynote speaker at our creative leadership graduation, right? And I knew nothing about you at that point. Danica had brought you in, and you told a story, and you had this list of things that were really, really important. And you made such a big impact in my life, because when I listened to the things that you were saying and the stories you were telling, I was like, oh, this dude is really doing something incredible with bridging art and community together. And so you told a very specific story, and if you will, I want to ask you to do it again.
Oh, for sure.
About this homeless individual or unhoused individual that you were working with. Tell the story.
That's so awesome that you remember that.
Oh yeah, man, dude, it was big time.
Yeah, that's my Dan Holder story. That's my guy.
Yeah.
So this was a huge project. It was commissioned by a grant in the James Irwin grant, and through the San Diego Museum of Art. And the idea behind this was providing more public art to underprivileged communities, underserved communities. And so we were working in Lemon Grove on this underpass. So it's underneath the 94 freeway. There are 2 walls, one west facing, one east facing, and they're about 20 feet tall by 191 feet long, each of them. So it's you can imagine how enormous this effort was. We had 16 professional artists working with us, hundreds of community members and organizations that were working with us. And so a big part of it was community paint days. So we had a lot of community out there helping us, and they were out there from the beginning to the end. It's really something beautiful. But on one of the days that we had a lot of community out, there was this unhoused person across the street on his bike watching us for the better part of the day. And he looked like he was intoxicated, or he was under the influence of something. And so he was making people nervous. And so they kept they were coming to me, the community members, saying, "Hey, he's making me nervous. I don't know what he's got going on." And so I went to talk to him. I went across the street to talk to him, and he said, just really appreciate what you guys got going on here. I'd like to be involved somehow. But he was, like I said, intoxicated and under the influence. And so I said, "Look, man."
He's living his best life.
He really was.
Yeah.
I said, "We would love to have you." I said, "But why don't you come back tomorrow? Why don't you sober up? Why don't you come back tomorrow? And then, we'll have something for you." And I didn't think he was going to come back, honestly, right? And he did. The next day he came back, and he was ready to go to work. And so I told him, I said, "Look, man, I can't pay you, but what I can pay you, I can pay you in companionship, and I can pay you in sandwiches." and I'll never forget what he told me. He says, "I don't want anything from you." I was like, I've done so many bad things in my life. I just want to be part of something good.
Wow.
And it gives me goosebumps, man, because I'll never forget that, right? And so that day that he came back, he had this sketchbook with him. And so come to find out, he was a sign painter, a very accomplished sign painter. His dad taught art at the at UNLV. And, just a strange relationship or whatever, but somehow he just ended up in the streets, right? But he had this sketchbook with these beautiful drawings. Like, it was amazing. I was like, man, this guy is somebody, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so he was there, man, we were there for three solid months, man. I dedicated a lot to that project, and he was there for 3 solid months, and he was there every day, man. And so and it was cool because he took on a leadership role. Like, people weren't nervous around him after a while. They actually saw who he was. And he took on leadership roles and really started showing people how to paint, taking on big sections. It was amazing, just by giving him a chance, right? And I'll never forget this, man. I read this. Emmett Fox is somebody that I read quite a bit, and he's a spiritual guru. And so he says, you have to look for the Christ in people, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, I interpret it as you look for the God in everyone. Yep. And I saw the God in Dan Holder that day. And I remembered what Emmett Fox said. And so I saw the God in all the people in Southeast San Diego.
Yeah.
And I think that has been the tool for community work.
Yeah. And you see the God in all the folks in Whitman Park.
Absolutely.
You
yes.
know? Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
And I think, man, like, I really, really have to say, like, I think that is ultimately, like, such an important thing, and why I think you're such an important voice and leader in our community, because it is very difficult to see the God mm-hmm. in people. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You made a choice to go talk to Dan that day, right? And you went to him gracefully, right? And to me, that doesn't happen very
mm-hmm,
often,
mm-hmm. right?
I can't even say if I would have done that,
okay.
Like, I would like to hope that I would, but I can't say for sure I would have. And, because of that, you opened up, who knows what happened in that individual's life,
right.
But at least for that 3 months, you created a space for him to be seen again. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So,
yeah.
I think I know the answer to this question. I certainly have my version of the answer, but it's a question I like to ask, and it's a little deep,
mm-hmm,
right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, when it's all said and done, right? What do you want the world to say about you as a human, right? Your legacy.
Mm.
I know it's deep, man. I should probably warn people.
I was going to say, why didn't you text me this earlier, man?
Well, because you know what? The reason why is because I want it to come from your heart,
mm-hmm.
and I think that if I text it to you, would.
That's true.
You would.
It'd be well scripted.
It'd be well scripted. But, what do you want the world to think about Miguel as your legacy?
Yeah, that's a layered question, obviously, but I think the one thing that I want to leave for my legacy, obviously, is my children.
Yep.
Right. And just doing right, like when you're called to action, doing the right thing, being a good person, and being of service. Right. A lot of people don't see that. I look at my teaching as service.
Yeah.
I look at all the community art, the public art. I think back on all the projects and all the murals that I've done, and I look at that as service. And I think that's the one thing. That's probably the most important thing that I would like people to, remember me by.
That's beautiful, and I think that to kind of like wrap it up, in the context of like the story you just told, it's like, you know, when you try to find or see the God in someone, you know, without getting into the debate of religion and God, right? What I know God to be is love and service.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And I think that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
cool, man. Tell me, let's end it on a slightly funny note.
Okay.
All right. Why not? You know what I mean? All right. What is your favorite ice cream?
Favorite ice cream, pineapple coconut. Thrifties.
Pineapple. Whoa.
Pineapple coconut.
Pineapple coconut. I didn't even know that was an
Thrifties.
actual
What?
ice cream.
I'm gonna hook you up.
Okay. All right.
Gotcha.
Pineapple coconut. Favorite song, like go-to song, like what is it?
Ooh.
I
Oh,
know.
man. Yeah.
I know.
Ooh.
That's a tough one.
Jeez, bro. Yeah. Why didn't you text me that one?
I know, man, because I want it in the moment.
Oh, man. Golly. Ooh, like at the moment or just all
Yeah,
time?
like right now, at the moment.
Oh, like
favorite song right now.
Right now I've had, Blue and Exile. So they just came out with some freestyle. It's called Freestyles. That's the name of the album. But
okay,
there's one track on there called Jesus that I just can't get enough of.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I currently have on repeat.
I like that question because it usually it leads me to say, all right, I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Like,
yeah. I do the same.
I would check that out probably before I check out your pineapple ice cream.
It's funny. I do the same with my students.
Yeah.
Yeah. We create a playlist for each class.
Oh, cool.
And I love it because I get to learn new music, new artists. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. And a book you would recommend anyone reading? That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Golly. I would say, I think, like I'm thinking of all of them, and I think a collection of all of them, probably the best one is probably The Fifth Agreement by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yes.
Yeah, not the Four Agreements, but The Fifth Agreement. Because I read The Fifth Agreement before I read the Four Agreements.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I would say that one, right?
Okay.
Because that fifth one is really about unlearning.
Yeah.
Unlearning, questioning.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the first time I learned of that concept.
Ah, okay.
And so I think that's why that book is so important. But then I did go back and read the Four Agreements. So either one, the Four Agreements or the Fifth Agreement.
I like a month and a half ago started listening to the Four Agreements.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have to. I like, and I'm not opposed to reading.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
I just feel like it's easier for me to listen, and then but I always buy the book because I want to like listen, and then if there's something that really stands out, I go into the book and like highlight it, so I can make a reference of it. Yeah. But I started and I was like, it's weird because I had read pieces of the Four Agreements in the past, right? And that's why I was like, I want to get back into it. And I was listening to it and I was like, man, this book is deep. Yes. Like it's sometimes even like you got to just push pause and try to like, contemplate what was actually being said.
Absolutely.
So,
I do the same with audiobooks, man. Like when I'm in the studio, I'm listening to audiobooks, and I have those moments where I might be into something painting. I'm like, damn, I need to pause that. Yeah. I need to replay that. That needs to digest a little bit better. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Hey, man, I am so grateful that I got an opportunity to meet you. I'm so honored for what you're doing in the community for Mesa Arts Center. Obviously I'm rocking your
you look great,
stuff,
by the way.
Man. Thank you, man. So thank you so much for what you're doing, man. And continue to just keep putting those positive vibes in the world, because I think that you have the spirit and essence of a really good leader. Like people will look up to you, right? And I think that's important because with that power, you can change the world. So,
thank you, man.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate you, man.
Thank
you so much, man.
Yep. Have a good one. All right. Yeah. All right. And we're going to close it out with our famous smooth jazz.